Good morning again, Green Spring. Well, there you have it. President Kennedy has challenged us to go to the moon. And, you know, and before the end of the decade, this is 1961, so we've only got about 9 years to do it. And how did we do it? I mean, after all, in 61, we really didn't have all that much of a missiles and so forth, so we had to do a lot of work. And we're going to talk about actually the end product here. We're not going to worry about the Friendship 7 with John Glenn. We're not going to worry about the Gemini program. We're going to talk specifically about the Apollo program, which did land our people on the moon. And John Roosma and I, John Roosma is my guest. He was on last fall when we talked about the history of the Air Force in September. And he's a docent at the Air and Space Museum, so he does this for his living.
Yes.
If you can call volunteering as a docent the living, but anyway, John does this. He knows all about it. And we're going to talk about going to the moon. And we also have another special reason that we'd like to talk about it, and that is he and I have two classmates who were involved. The first, on slide 1, you'll see the Apollo 1 crew. It includes Ed White, who's in the center. Ed White was a classmate of ours, class of 1952, and he would have been one of the first men to walk on the moon had he lived. But he died in the fire of Apollo 1. Right. It was January 1967.
Yeah, I was in
So
Vietnam.
January the 67. January 67. Yeah. And so that eliminated that first crew. Well, Mike Collins, who's another classmate of ours, was in the second crew, and actually the first crew to go to the moon. He was the guy who stayed in the command service module and flew it around the moon while he was waiting for Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to return. So we're going to tell you about this program starting from scratch. So John, let's tell them about the Apollo program.
Okay, well, we've got our orders to go to the moon. After due diligence, a crew was selected. You just saw a picture of them on there.
Did we see the Mike Collins crew?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
And there he is right there. There's Mike in the middle, and of course Buzz on the right and Neil on the left. And that's the crew that was designated to land. We practiced Apollo 8 and 9 had gone up and they looked at the moon, but they never landed. Apollo 11 was designated as the group that would land on the moon. And how do you do that? Well, we can see, I've got some artifacts here, but the principal way of going to the moon is by rocket. You've got to get up in the air, and this is amazing. This whole program, the Apollo program, costing a bunch of money, over $30 billion, and that's, of course, that's in 1969 dollars. But this program was to go. It was very oriented. The mission accomplished, designated, land on the moon. Very simple. And everybody had their marching orders.
Well, actually, they had 3 ways of doing it, didn't they? They had the idea that they were going to go directly from the Earth, land on the moon, and return,
right, which
would have taken an enormous,
they didn't have the power to do it.
Incredible. And then they were going to do an Earth orbit and go directly to the moon, right, from the Earth orbit. And then they finally decided to do going from Earth to a lunar orbit and then go down with a separate vehicle.
Exactly.
Which is what we wound up.
And that's what we're doing. And of course, those same ideas that you just mentioned are, I hate to jump ahead, but going to Mars. Again, that is going to come into the picture sooner or later.
Idea.
But one of the biggest things that really got it going is the F1 engine. And in the Apollo program, we had some shots being made before, but if you look over here, here is one of the Apollo 5 missions ready to go. It is on the screen. You can see it there. The lower portion, it's 3 sections. You got the stage 1. You can see stage 2. Stage 3, there's 3 stages. Those are all burning. And of course, above that, of course, the Apollo crew and the lunar lander. And how this comes about is very unique. The 5 F1 engines, they're gigantic. We got a next slide. We have a picture of there they are. Notice the people standing there. I mean, it gives you kind of an idea of how big those F1 engines are. They weigh 10 tons each. Yeah. So there's 50 tons sitting right there on the rear end.
Each nozzle is 12 feet across. Right?
Yeah, it's huge. So, but when they light off, those are going to burn at a fantastic rate. 5 engines burn 4.5 million gallons in 150 seconds. Or I like to say, really, it burns 15 tons a second. Can you imagine fuel burning 15 tons a second just to get it flowing? Yeah. Gigantic compressors are designed. They're mixed potassium permanganate and hydrogen peroxide to turn the turbines. The turbines run at 33,000 RPM. They pump the kerosene, or JP4, and the liquid oxygen in through the orifices, light it off, and that's how we get our 7.5 million pounds of thrust. 7.5 million pounds of thrust. And then it's very interesting, when you see it take off, it starts very slow. And you're saying, well, why isn't it going faster? Well, hey, it's burning 15 tons a second. Give it a couple of more seconds, and next thing you know, it's gone and out of sight. And the first stage burns for roughly 2.5 minutes, and you're 38 miles up in the air. Okay, at which time we're going to have a drop-off. The first stage drops off. It's in the Atlantic Ocean someplace. The second stage kicks in. It's going to burn for around 6 minutes, which then puts it up to about 100 miles up, and it's doing about 14,000 miles an hour. We're at 14,000 miles an hour. Well, that won't hack it. At 14, you'll come back into the Earth. You just can't maintain it. So how do you get more? You'll have the third stage. The third stage will burn in 2 sections. We light the third stage. It pushes it up to 17,500. That's a magic number. Wherever you go, anybody that wants to orbit the Earth has to achieve at least 17,500. So 17,500, we're now in orbit.
Miles per hour.
Yeah, and we're parked in this park in the orbit. Okay, now the time comes along when we're waiting for the moon and to be in a proper position, so when we take off, the rendezvous will be much simpler. At that time arrives, the computer says go, the rest of the 3 is burned, and away they go. It pushes them up to 24,000 miles an hour, 7 miles a second, and that pushes them off into lunar, breaking Earth's gravity, getting into lunar gravity, and that's the trajectory to the moon.
Well, let's go back and talk about each of those stages, just
Sure.
to show them what they look like. So if we could see the next figure.
Which one?
That would be stage, no, that's stage 2, the second stage.
Yep. It's the Saturn V.
There's the second stage.
There's the second stage, and then you can see it's all fuel with 5 N1 engines. These are much smaller than the big F1 engines, but they're still producing the thrust to get going.
Yeah.
Of course, now they're lighter; they can be smaller. They don't have to. That's the whole thing. Everything is weight, and of course, it keeps dropping off.
Well, the total weight was about 5 million pounds?
6 million pounds.
6 million pounds.
Yeah, and that's why it took 7.5 million pounds of thrust to get it going.
Moving, yeah.
And that's and with that differential thrust, it makes it very nice to move out.
And then we have a picture of the third stage too.
Yep, there's the third stage, and it's going to drop away. Again, burning into 2 different sections, and when that goes, now
the interesting thing about that third stage, what are those little pedals or whatever they are on the right side of it? Is that
that fall off? it doesn't show it on there. But
It doesn't show, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just the engine
Internet.
shroud, all right.
And then there we go. Now there's what you see there is what we is all we have left, right there. And that very interesting because everything going to the moon is in that picture you can see right there. And of course it's time now to blow off the safety rocket, which was of course used to take them up to about, that stays with them to about 90 miles up, and that goes off, again, a weight reducing. And now the command module is exposed right there, and there is the command module.
And you can see the people inside, the astronauts inside.
3 astronauts inside, and that doesn't look like much space and very crowded in there. It is, but don't forget you can crawl into all the different kind of corners. There's no, everything is weightlessness. You don't know which way is up, down, side, etc. Okay, there we have it standing up, going. We don't have that one here. Let's see, Saturn number 8.
Well, that's
Yeah, yeah, but
that's this model with
That's
the
that one.
clouds going behind it. Huh?
yeah, the clouds going behind
Yeah.
that.
All right.
Okay,
So
well, there's the picture. That's not quite right what we have. If we could show this one.
okay, let's show this one. We're going to take the lunar module out of this way.
There you go. Okay.
Does this
Yeah, we're going to focus on that.
work?
There. Oh, beautiful. Okay, now starting on the left, you can see that I call them the pedals. The pedals open up because it's right now it's over the lunar lander. The command module and service module, which is Mike Collins is driving, or flying.
And then what is the red there?
The red is the command module.
Okay.
The portion below it is the service module. And of course, they have to latch on to the lunar lander. Well, they can't do it because it's underneath them or behind them. So Mike taxis out, as you see him going up there. He does a 180-degree turn. That's what he's doing in number 2, turning around. And now he's going to go back in, and you can just barely see the trace of the lunar lander in there. He's going to lock onto the lunar lander, reverse his thrusters, as you can see in the last slide on the right, and pulls the whole unit out. And now that's the total machine that's going to go to the moon.
Okay.
Everything's there.
And when did they do this? When did they perform this? Were they in orbit around the moon, or were
Not
they
quite yet. Yeah, on the
before
way.
they went to the orbit?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they wanted to make sure they had everything ready that they were going to use on the moon to be available.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so now they coast along and they're going to arrive at the moon. Right, here's a great picture here. You can see how they are coasting along. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are going to leave the command module into the lunar lander, and now,
Which is on the right.
they're on the right. They're going to break away. In this case, Neil and Buzz are going to go down and land on the moon. Mike is going to start into orbit, going around and around, 2.5-hour orbit. He's going to do it about 12 times, waiting for him to come back.
So the next picture, I believe, is actually the lunar module leaving, or having left the next picture.
Which one?
That's it. So that's the
Okay.
lunar lander there, and you actually see, I guess, the
Well, you
vapor
can
coming.
see the legs.
Yeah, the legs. And that's after it has left and ready to go down to the moon, right?
Yeah. There they are, of course.
Okay.
Now, getting into that position, you see right there, Neil Armstrong had to take command of the, well, he was the commander of the Eagle, that was Eagle, and he made the descent and was coming in for a landing, and the area they designated for a landing was all rocky, rocks they didn't really could see in the original.
Now that's
And-
2 parts, isn't it?
Yeah, the upper portion is the ascent stage, which of course it's all one unit right now, And right, you see there, it has landed. The secret I wanted to mention, though, is Neil Armstrong did a beautiful job of landing. He decided, hey, I can't land here. Oh my goodness, I only got 30 seconds of fuel. I've got to move the unit. And of course, all of a sudden Houston gets all nervous because, hey, wait a minute, he's not landing where he's supposed to landing. He's doing all this room, boom, right on ad hoc. And he pulls it up, moves it over, and next thing you know, he says, dust is coming up, and which meant that they could almost on the ground, and next thing you know, Houston, Tranquility Base, the Eagle has landed. And that was...
Hewlett-Packard used to have an app on their little calculator that did the moon landing for you, and versus the, if you were calling it, that was about 64 kilobytes. That's about what they had as a computer in the lander.
Computer is extremely small. Your watch, people, any digital watch are more data and everything else than they have in that machine. But they did it, and they went with it.
And we have a picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon. There he is with the American flag.
Yeah, there it is. How they wrinkled the flag up like that to make sure it looked like
the wind was
the wind was blowing. Yeah, because you can see there's no wind, and at least it makes it look a little more authentic.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, we have Mike Collins flying around the moon.
Yeah,
and that's the next picture.
Yeah. Mike is all by himself up there flying around.
Command service module.
There is a good example of the command module. You see the command module on the top. Coming back down, you see the whole service module, and of course with a service module engine. And that engine is very viable because it's going to be used once again to get them home.
It's sort of an interesting picture, isn't it, with that big nozzle sticking out the
well, they needed a big nozzle to get down.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and so now we're going to go to takeoff, and we got 2 takeoffs. You can see the one there going up. There you go. And then if you could come dial in on that picture right here, it's pretty good because you see a lot of stuff on this. By the way, they were only on the moon a very short time. The mission at this point was get on the moon, get the rocks, and get back off and come home safely. And that's what we're...
About 2.5 hours actually out on the moon?
2 hours, yeah.
2 hours, yeah.
And then 9 hour total on the moon. So you can see they're getting ready to go. You're not going to hold that up?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we didn't, I don't think it showed.
You didn't get this? I thought they did.
Yeah, there you go. What I'd like to show you on here real quick, notice down here, you can't see very well, there's 2 white dots. Those 2 white dots are backpacks. They're a gear, of course, on the moon, you're weighing 1/6 if you do here. 180 pounds, you're 30 pounds on the moon. Very nice. Jenny Craig, we should add up. Anyhow, there they are. In this case, they've just blasted off. Neil Armstrong, of course, is flying, and they're calling up to Mike. We're going to come up, we're going to rendezvous, we're going to dock, and we're coming aboard. And that's what they did. Once they were all...
That's the blast off of another view of it. Yeah. There it is. That's coming back.
Yeah, that's coming back. We've gotten... that's really not quite coming back. What we have there now is the lunar, the ascent stage, looking for getting aboard with Mike Collins.
Oh, right, that's what I meant. I meant the coming back from the moon. And the interesting thing is seeing the Earth in the background there too.
Yeah, that was it. The blue planet shows blue, and that's made it very nice.
Okay.
Okay, and then we go on from there. The next one, of course, when they get in close to Earth, they're going to make, we got to make our decision. We got to make sure we make our last calculations to see where we are. We're right on track, because if they're not on track, if you're short and shallow, you'll bounce off Earth's atmosphere. And if you're too deep, you'll tuck in and you'll go down. And
so let's go back to the other picture, the picture of the command module. That's it. Okay.
Yeah. because right now, just before the fire, they've gotten rid of everything. All that's left is the command module. The command module all by itself. And at this point, they have to turn it around and make sure the heat shield is facing into the atmosphere.
Now, what's the heat shield?
The heat shield is on the back side there. It's made of epoxy resin, very, very great absorption of heat up to about 5,000 degrees. It bursts into flame at around 5,000, melts, and that's taking it lights up fires, and as it goes back through the.
So that's what we saw. That's what the flame was all about.
The flame is the epoxy resin.
Okay, so it's slow down now enough to get back into.
It's slowing it down. As a matter of fact, I asked Mike one time how hot it got inside, and he says it was warm. But it did everything it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And now, once that's taken care of, they slow down. Now they can start deploying parachutes. They use a couple of drug chutes to slow it down as much as they can, and then they started putting those 3 huge parachutes on there, which all pop out, and they drift them down to the water, splash them in the water. They hit about 5 miles an hour.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
And actually, they went in. It was turned over, pointed side down, right?
Probably, yeah.
And then those 2 little things on top turned it back up?
Yeah, that's their lifesaver right there, to get it back up, float. And then the SEALs come along, and they put a flotation collar around it.
Well, let's talk about how close they landed to their carrier. Was it Kitty Hawk?
No.
No.
I'll think of it in a minute, but I don't remember. But the problem the Kitty Hawk had is staying out of the landing area. They didn't want to get.
They landed within about 13 miles of it.
Yeah, very close. Like and they had choppers that left the aircraft carrier over, pick them up, and they brought them out.
So now then, let's see that picture again of them in the water. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's a great shot.
They've come from the carrier, brought the rafts so that they can pull them out.
Yep.
And they're leaving the capsule.
Right. They're in good shape. Now they get out. Of course, they're going to go into quarantine. This being the first time we've had anybody in space.
Yeah, that was, 21 days or so?
Oh, yeah. They had a special trailer, an Airstream trailer rigged for them, which, by the way, we have it at the museum out of Dulles.
Oh, do you?
It's there. I think they only used it for about a week, and they said, well, nothing's happening, so it must be, they're all hale and hearty. We'll abandon this, and they then started to have great celebrations.
I guess they did that for the first 3 Apollo launches or on the moon?
No, this is the only one.
Is this the only one they did?
Yeah, it was international agreement of what, didn't want to bring stuff back, supposed stuff back, and that was the way they combated it.
And they brought back how many pounds of rocks? They
brought back, well, I don't know the exact number. But
200 and some pounds, I think it was.
Well, the pounds that remember I showed you the backpacks. Those backpacks, the weight of those backpacks was converted into rocks, so the weight and balance wouldn't have to be recomputed, and those rocks are the ones that came home.
Well, now, while we were going to the moon, Russia was, or the Soviet Union was so far, they were the first one to put an atom in orbit, and they were the first ones to walk in space, and they were really.
It was like the hare and the tortoise.
Yeah.
We were of course, the tortoise, and the hare were the Russians, and they did everything first.
And they also wanted to go to the moon first, right? So
right.
They must have had a program.
Well, this is where the big race was, starting with Sputnik, way back in the 57.
57, yeah.
They're going there. Ever from there, they were doing everything first, except one thing. They didn't get to the moon. And you tell them why.
Well, they didn't get to the moon because they developed a rocket, also a big rocket, and it was actually 50 feet in diameter, whereas our stage 1 was 33 feet in diameter. Yeah. Their stage 1 was 50 feet in diameter. Well, they just couldn't get a successful launch. They destroyed 4 of them in attempting to launch. Then they said, well, we're going to get stuff from the moon. We're going to get rocks and so forth from the moon before the Americans do. And they actually put into orbit. They went down to the moon, but again, it failed. So they didn't. Yeah, but they were actually about 2 hours before we went down to the moon. The Russians were going, or the Soviets were going to go to the moon, and it crashed. Yep. That was the end of it. So we won in the overtime.
Overtime, yeah. Oh, it was quite a hustle.
Well, John, you know, this to me, this 363 feet tall. And yeah, that's actually from one end of a football stadium to the other end, not just a football field, which is 300 feet, right, but you know, from one end of the stadium to the other is just about it. Right. And if you can imagine it, and 33 feet in diameter.
Yeah, that's if you take 3 Greyhound buses, you can line them side by side in there. That's what's 33 feet.
I remember in 1963, I think it was. Being one of the producers of this, and we were standing talking around this big cylinder, and I said, well, gee, is there a chance that we could see this stage one, this big, says you're standing beside it. Here we are standing, but it's a cylinder. We could see, well, we also saw the Apollo and so forth in that trip.
I'd like to show real quick what Mike had to go through.
Yeah, let's
it was stacked in the missile like this, okay? Mike had to taxi out, turn around, go back in, latch onto the lunar lander, and pull it out, and this is the way they went to the moon from then on.
Yeah.
Now when they go, Neil, of course, and Buzz detached, they went down and landed. Neil went around, Mike went around and around. Then Neil came up. They joined again. They got back in. This was then thrown and crashed. Actually, this
it went back to the moon, right?
Like yeah. They just crashed back on the moon. And now this is the way they came home. Just as we said, they finally got rid of the service module. It went. And this is all that came back right here. Until then they turned the heat shield in. The heat shield absorbing the heat, allowing them to break through.
And that weighed about how much?
This weighed 13,000 pounds.
13,000.
So we went from 6 million pounds to 13,000 pounds. It's a mission of attrition.
It sure was.
Yeah, but everything worked. The American workmanship was fantastic on this.
Well, that's the important thing, because when the first full test of this, it wasn't testing each stage one by one. Yeah. They actually did a full-up test.
Exactly.
Which was a gutsy thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Which saved a lot of time.
They had a lot of people at NASA.
Since it worked.
Really.
Since it worked.
It worked. Yeah. That's what allowed us to maintain our timeline against the Russians. And that probably hastened them to go do some things and make some mistakes. I don't know if it did or not.
And to put the man on the moon and return him in this decade, as Kennedy had asked us to do.
Right, right.
And it was a fabulous journey. Yep. Well, John, you know, we talked about the Air Force in September, the history of it, and now we've talked about space. Maybe we could go back and talk about the origin of flying. Well, I wouldn't say the origin of flying.
Well, yeah.
Our first successful.
Well, we have Icarus, and today
the people who did it, the Wright brothers.
The Wright brothers, right?
Yeah, and
that's
like
my
you
tie.
Have a tie that might have. So maybe we could talk about that a little later.
Well, we did. Yeah, we'll be glad to.
Let's make that a date here.
Whatever's convenient, right?
I don't know when, but next couple of months. All right, folks. Well, that's it.